evening and good to have you with us on this edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, Disha Ravi, you may not have heard about her until this morning, but she is a 22-year-old environment activist, climate activist, who's now been arrested in the Toolkit tweet case, the one being linked to the farmers' protest and the violence that unfolded on Republic Day. Remember, this toolkit was actually shared by Greta Thunberg after the violence that erupted at Red Fort on January 26th. The 22-year-old Disha has been charged with sedition and criminal conspiracy and spreading hatred. Now, according to the Delhi police who've made this arrest, this toolkit was created and backed by pro-Khalistani group, and that is what they are investigating right now. They say Disha, along with Nikita and Shantanu and perhaps a few more, including those with Khalistani links, drafted the toolkit that was then shared with Greta Thunberg. Now, Disha, they also say, was arrested in presence of the local Bangalore police, contrary to some questions being raised and some claims being made that the due process was not followed. The toolkit, they say, was used to tarnish India's image. And there was a detailed conspiracy, a detailed action plan in this toolkit that had to be implemented for January 26 and subsequent dates. Now, there is much conversation taking place in our country and actually in many other parts of the world as well about if this was the right thing to do. We don't know what Disha Ravi was actually up to. We don't know what her connections are. And so it is unfair to pronounce a verdict on that. But we do know that she faces some very, very serious charges, while she may have only intended to spread the word about the farmers' protest. We do know that the use of toolkit isn't new, isn't necessarily a bad thing. That across the world, including our country, to spread the word, to create a narrative, to create awareness, to spread propaganda, all kinds. This template is often used. It's the modern day digital era version of planning a movement, a tool that is used to create buzz, generate buzz, and add to a movement, which is what many of these people seem to be wanting to do. Now, while the courts decide on Disha's case, I am going to take this opportunity to talk about a larger issue which I believe truly is a concern. Has been for a while in our country, but more so increasingly with every year. A conversation that we need to have about the sedition law itself and the way it is used time and again in our country. This law, if you look at the data, shows an interesting trend that in more and more states, every year, more such cases are being filed. And the number is only going up and further up. We also know more and more people are getting arrested under the sedition law. And charge sheets are being filed in not as many cases as the arrests and the FIRs, but charge sheets are filed. But the conviction rate is very, very low. The number of people who get acquitted, who get discharged in these cases is actually high. There is a disconnect that suggests, and which is why we are asking this question tonight, that are the state agencies being overzealous in using this law? Should it be used this casually? Is it being used this casually? That's the question I want to put across to our panelists this evening. Let's say good evening to the panelists who are joining us right now on this debate. Sudesh Verma, spokesperson for the BJP. Sanjay Hegde, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court. Ishkaran Bhandari, Advocate with the Supreme Court. Mr. Neeraj Kumar, former Commissioner of Delhi Police, joins us this evening. And Bahar Dutt, an environmental journalist, also with us this evening. And I actually want to start off with the two legal experts we have. Sanjay Hegde, with you first. Your view on how sedition law is used in our country, and if we need to relook at it, just even basis statistics. The sense I get is that we are overzealous in using it, and by the end of it, nothing comes out in each case except harassment.
Well, this section has been there on the statute book from British India. Free India wanted to get rid of it. It was under this section that both Tilak and Mahatma Gandhi were tried. In fact, at Mahatma Gandhi's trial, the British judge actually bows down to Gandhiji and says that, look, this is the law, I have to sentence you, but if the government were to release you, I would be the happiest man. When the constitution came in, the question of constitutionality came up before the Supreme Court in 1962 in Kedarnath's case. We had also brought in the First Amendment to the Constitution, which restricted the kind of free speech that the Constitution originally envisaged. Pandit Nehru had said that the sooner we get rid of sedition law, the better, but he did nothing about it. So when the Supreme Court Constitution bench considered the section, they said this section may be overbroad, but it can be read down in a way to make it constitutional, and it's only when there is actual violence that ensues can a case be filed. And obviously, this section also requires has other safeguards, including official sanction to be given for prosecuting under this section. So they upheld it in a very narrow framework. Nevertheless, because the section was there, it was easily available for every Thanedar to first invoke it. Thereafter, if no sanction was granted, the matter didn't go to trial. But nevertheless, there was something which possibly had a life sentence with which you could threaten any dissent or opposition. The Supreme Court, again, in the 1990s, dealt with a case where two Sikh gentlemen, on the day of Indira Gandhi's assassination, raised slogans in Punjab, hailing the assassination, etc., etc. Even there, the Supreme Court didn't convict. They went on the previous judgment and said that no violence ensued. Despite everything that the Supreme Court has said, this is frequently invoked. It's a very handy weapon for any government at the center or the state level. Many of them say, no, it's a very harsh law. We will take care of it when we come into government. But no sooner that they come into government that they forget all about it. I think it is time that the court re-looked at the section. Probably a larger bench than 5 will have to look at it and strike it down one day.
Ishkaran Bhandari, your view on this, the fact that this is more and more increasingly being used in our country. And if I look at the data, it's difficult to get data from before 2010 or 2014. But in the recent times, it's just on the rise. Now, should the law be re-looked at? Because it gives the sense that it's just being used to quash any kind of dissent.
See, the problem is all governments need and love to have power over the speech of their citizens. Freedom fighters who were drafting the constitution gave a very wide freedom of speech, but when some of those came to power, formed the first cabinet, the first amendment they brought was restricting our fundamental rights, including the right to speech. That is why I'm giving you, just at the very inception itself, when you are in opposition versus when you come to power, the mindset changes. And that's a reality. Different state governments, different central governments would come and go. But when it comes to speech, the government, irrespective of the political party forming the government, likes to have this power. We can see that in 66A also, how initially it was opposed, but when the hearings were going on, the government had changed, and initially affidavits were filed supporting it. So we have seen that across board, across governments, we can't deny that. Also, secondly, what you're raising, the larger point of speech, was in light in my this comedian Faruqi's case. And I tweeted and I asked question, do people want 153A and 295A to go? Because once you have these laws would be evoked, these laws would be used. Unfortunately, be it left or be it right, there are enough people, in fact, I would say an overwhelming majority of people who want these laws to stay. And since the people themselves want these laws to stay, obviously the governments are going to use them. If you ask my personal opinion, it has to be a level playing field. I do not even like 153A, 295A. I do not like the sedition law. I believe we need to have a much greater freedom of speech in this country. But unfortunately, as I said, leave the governments. If you were to do a poll asking people, do you want 153A or 295A to go? I am telling you, my experience has been people will find reasons to say no, it should not go. It should stay in place because we need to have some restriction. We need to have some maryada when we are talking about things. And that's fair enough. End of the day, the people have to decide it and the government will exercise the power. So when you're asking this larger debate, our freedom of speech is very different from freedom of speech in US or certain Western democracies. And we have to live with it because no government will change it because people themselves do not strongly enough want to change it.
Okay, fair enough. And I think both of you are largely agreeing on this point that there will not be any political will. It's a law that whichever government comes into power would want to use. It helps them take on such challenging situations. While I know you said, Ishkaran, that you don't think these laws should exist, I don't agree with you that if the people want it, they should. People also wanted at one point of time traditions and rituals like dowry to exist. We went ahead and created laws and made those illegal. So with times to change, a lot of these laws must also change, irrespective of what people think, especially when it comes to religious issues.
Yeah. I agree. Can I just answer that for a second?
Yeah.
I agree with you. But I said neither the government wants to change nor the majority of people want to change.
Yeah.
Either of them have to want to change it. No, if the government doesn't want to change, the people have to bring pressure on it, or the government for social reform wants to change it. So there is no incentive on the government wanting to change it. They don't want to reduce their power, nor, as per my opinion, do majority of Indians want these laws to be abolished.
Okay, so let's take it forward then. Mr. Neeraj Kumar, then what do we do? Is there a way of, without, say, doing away with the law, fixing this problem, bringing in some more safeguards or accountability? We are increasingly just seeing, students, youngsters, activists, environmentalists being booked under this law, which actually is for graver sins, I would think.
Mr. Hegde made a very important point. If an act of alleged sedition leads to violence, then surely it should be punishable. If I am trying to make statements against the government, that's all right. I mean, there are any number of people today who make statements, they write columns, they come on television channels and say things against the government. They don't get charged with sedition. It's only when somebody is saying something that leads to violence should this law be used. In this case, I mean, today we are talking about this subject because of the arrest of Disha Ravi from Bangalore. Well, I don't have all the details of the investigation, but I can safely presume that whatever action was done by creating first a WhatsApp group and then passing on this toolkit, creating the toolkit, having a Zoom meeting, and then involving international celebrities, it led to violence, and it led to violence on the 26th of January. Now, such an act should definitely be punishable. And at the moment, what we have on the statute book is the law on sedition. Although it has been often criticized, often castigated, often people have said that it should be scrapped, and so on and so forth. But at the moment, it is very much part of the Indian Penal Code, and that is why it is being used.
But how do you make this connection, Mr. Neeraj Kumar? Because yes, while yes, they did call for people to gather, use hashtags, physically protest at some embassies, follow people who may be spreading information and tweeting about the farm laws. Rihanna's tweet, which is where it all began, actually happened after the Republic Day violence. So wouldn't it be a challenge to say, well, all of this actually happened only after the violence took place and a lot of it in other parts of the world?
No, that is not correct. Most of what Disha Ravi is alleged with happened before 26th of January. It is not after 26th January. She created the WhatsApp group before 26th January. She created the toolkit. I mean, the group created the toolkit together before 26th of January. It was then circulated. And maybe the tweets from Rihanna and Greta Thunberg came later. But that doesn't mean a thing. Most of the that were done were before 26th of January.
Okay. All right. Sanjay Hegde wants to respond before I go to our other two panelists. Yes.
Where was the causal link between the tweets and the violence? All that happened was that this toolkit was for amplifying the voices of the farmers. Some celebrity abroad picks it up. How do you link it with the violence which happened in Delhi with regard to farmers separately moving on to the Red Fort and firing and all that? Now, I also put to you that there is this judgment of the Supreme Court in Balbir Singh's case, where there has been violence which occurred after the assassination of the Prime Minister, and there were slogans. Despite that, the Supreme Court said that there was no causal link. Sir, it's only if, for instance, this would be sedition. You have a police unit consisting largely of one community, and somebody says, we shall not obey the orders of the government. Let us turn against the government orders. Incites a mutiny. That might come within what the Supreme Court intended, not these kind of totally unrelated chatter.
Neeraj Kumar, would you want to add to that?
Yes. From the information I have,
yes,
there was a direct link between the creation of the toolkit and all those activities that took place and the violence.
Okay.
The whole idea of proceeding to the Red Fort and doing whatever happened there, it was very much part of the transactions that took place prior to 26th of January through the toolkit and through the activities that happened in cyberspace between Disha, Shantanu and Nikita and other associates.
Okay, I just want to add though, because I am also very, very intrigued and I do want to know where it all comes together. A very specific question was asked to the Delhi police in their news briefing, that where is the call for violence or the link to inciting violence, at which point the Delhi police said, well, the toolkit was created by a banned organization. Now, as far as my understanding is concerned, Sudesh Verma, the toolkit, the Delhi police itself says, was created by these activists, and there may be some link with one guy of a group which is supposed to be pro-Khalistani. So, have we not jumped the gun? Where is the banned organization right now that created this toolkit? Mr. Verma, I think you're on mute.
I was on mute. Sorry. You see, Tanvi, let me first tell you that nobody will be happy that if such a young lady who is just trying to struggle to figure out her calling in life is arrested for a cause she may or may not be aware. So that the police is going to investigate, isn't it? Her name has come because of certain investigation. Otherwise, why these people? Why not other people? Think about that also. Let's give police a chance. Let them figure out, because it doesn't happen because of political dispensation. If such a thing happened on 26th January, nobody liked that. Nobody liked the scenario. Why it happened? And you know that Khalistan, people may have some sympathy ideologically, but Khalistan movement, nobody supports in this country. You have known what has happened in the 80s in Punjab. Go and ask any of the parents who are alive. They will tell you how they have suffered because of that. So we cannot allow that thing to happen again. So police is investigating, trying to figure out. It has happened under judiciary. They have taken the lady to custody under judicial order. So Mr. Hegde arguing it here is not doing justice to the judicial system, because yes, the law exists. There's no doubt about that. And if you're talking of misuse of law, let me tell you, if I don't know whether it is a misuse or not. I cannot take a stand on that. I'm not as erudite as Mr. Hegde to say that it is misuse. It would come to light only if the police fails to establish a link and the girl is found to be innocent, isn't it? Then you can say that the law was misused. You know, there are so many FIRs which are filed, and these FIRs fall flat. You know that there is a prison under trial issue. Go to Tihar jail, you will find people languish in jail and they are punished. Their punishment for which they have been hanging in jail is less than the number of years they have already spent in jail. That is also an issue. So misuse of law is there everywhere. We would like a liberal human system to emerge, and we would like the police should be more accountable. No doubt about that. Any civil society will say that. But just because a girl who is very young has been caught, Tanvi, I saw a lot of sympathy in you. So we should make a law that below 20, below 25 people should not be arrested because they're too young, and above 60 should not be arrested because they're too old. So there is a sympathy factor. So only people in the age group of 25 to 55 should be arrested, because they are the most mature people. If they do crime, their crime is serious. It doesn't happen that way, isn't it? If Vara Rao does something wrong, he may be in his late 70s, he gets arrested. Crime is a crime, isn't it?
No, so Mr. Sudesh Sharma, my sympathy, as you interpret it, has nothing to do with the activist age. It is a lot to do.
Try to present the prosecuting agency in a bad light.
No, Mr. Verma, one thing I just want to clarify, what you see as my sympathy, although it's more about a conversation about use of this law in such cases, has nothing to do with Disha Ravi's age at all. And that's not what I'm talking about. I do understand if somebody in our country, a youngster or even an older person, feels for an issue, wants to talk about it and spread the word. Now, whether they are right or wrong in their own understanding of analysis of farm laws, the farmers' protest is completely different. But everybody has a right to campaign. Everybody has a right to protest in this country and to plan a campaign in this country. I'm sure you know very well how protests were done earlier and are now done.
Can I respond, Tanvi?
Yeah.
Tanvi, you see, nobody is objecting to the right to protest. That is what defines democracy. Nobody is saying that you cannot oppose the law. That is what defines the democracy. But if you become a part of conspiracy, either being a silent conspirator, you become a victim of the conspiracy, or you are an active conspirator that you have started the process, or you are a part of it. 120B involves everyone. Conspiracy, everyone will be conspirator. That is what the law is all about, isn't it? It doesn't say that you have become a victim of the conspiracy or you were an active conspirator. So let the law investigate and figure out whether it was actually a victim and should get sympathy and a lenient view, or whether she was a part of that overall conspiracy that tried to do what happened on 26th of January.
Okay, Bahar has heard everybody out and I can see she has many things to say. So go ahead, please.
Please go.
Well, I'd just like to say... Pardon me. I'd just like to say this is not the first time Fridays for Future India has been targeted. On the 23rd of July 2020, the same Delhi police cyber cell decided not only to suspend their Twitter account, but they were booked under the UAPA, the anti-terror law.
Correct.
So the same set of people, I'm not saying these individuals, but the same organization was booked under the Anti-Terror Act. And now it's all very well for Mr. Verma to say that let them investigate. But Mr. Verma, people's images get tarnished in the process. And within 4 hours, on the 23rd of July 2020, when I actually tweeted out the FIR of the police, within 4 hours, they withdrew the charges. Within 4 hours. because it actually tarnished India's image. Because everybody was asking on what basis have the climate strikers been booked under the anti-terror law. So even now, we're saying India's image has been tarnished. India's image has been tarnished because there is not enough evidence to prove that this particular individual incited the violence. I'm not arguing with you, sir, about if people are saying things against India, if she actually was there at India Gate or wherever, if she was there at the farmers' protest, she incited violence. Yes, let the process of law take place. But right now, simply on the basis of editing a toolkit to say that she is actively campaigning against the country, there's a huge lacuna in what is being said and the evidence.
Sudesh Verma, yes. I think you're on mute again, Mr. Verma.
Investigation should happen. Bahar, investigation should happen. This is what we are saying. The image of country was tarnished like never before on 26th of January. And people of this country want to know who were these people. If it happened genuinely out of outburst and police failed, is fine. You have a different explanation. But was there an international design? That is what people want to know. And maybe there could be some link. I cannot take judgment like you. I cannot say. But of course, law should take its course. And everybody is subjected to that, isn't it? Why should we have extra, feeling for that? Of course, if you talk about law of citizen, that is a different issue altogether. That is an ideological issue. And all such laws that, curtails the liberty of individuals should go. This is what we feel. But just because a person has been arrested because certain things, you cannot say that the law should go because of that.
Mr. Verma,
This is a larger
Mr.
argument,
Verma,
isn't it?
no.
Mr.
Verma, I'm not saying that.
The law of
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
Is given as a matter of right in the country, tell me.
Sir, you're deflecting from the issue. That is not what I'm saying. No.
Okay. I think Sudesh Verma, I think Bahar just wants to clarify on the point that she was making.
No, Mr. Verma, I am not questioning the validity of the law. All I am saying is that I see a larger conspiracy here, in fact, because the same group has in the past been targeted. Evidence was not found against them. And even 1 year ago, Delhi police withdrew the case within 4 hours because it did not stand. They had no.
I didn't figure this lady's name in any other group. First time we have discovered her.
No, Mr. Sudesh Verma. So let me, what Bahar is referring to, allow me to also tell our viewers, because we even had a debate at that time, and I'm sure Bahar that remembers, the EIA draft that was being brought in by the government was one of those instances where we did see a lot of environmental groups, including Friday for Future, campaign against. And this is a regular concept and a process in any country. There was a large protest and movement and conversation that happened for net neutrality in our country before the government finalized its rules. Similarly for the EIA draft. But when these guys started putting out the information on their websites, Friday for Future along with a few others were blocked by the police. And the anti-terror law UAPA was used in the FIR that was filed. After much outrage, it was taken back, and the Delhi police's explanation was that it was an error. It was a clerical error, if I'm not mistaken, or a typo of some kind, which is why it happened. Take a look at what happened in Mumbai when the RA protests were taking place. And, groups were even picked up then, put behind bars for several days together. And it boils down to the same fact that while you may have a law and order issue where you may need to act against certain people at some point, are we going overboard with the use of UAPA and sedition in such cases? Sanjay Hegde first and then Ishkaran Bhandari.
See, look at the pattern. Because they could get them under the UAPA, nevertheless, they were marked. So the first opportunity that they got, the same cell, the same investigators have now fixed them up. And the second question is, you may file an FIR under any section, but can you justify the arrest? Would the heavens have fallen if you had not arrested her? Would the heavens have fallen if you had produced her before the nearest magistrate in Bangalore? Did you ask for transit remand? Nothing. The Delhi police special cell had a special procedure whereby they picked her up over a weekend, and we know why police officials pick up people over weekends, so that at least a few days is spent in jail before bail is granted. You produce before the duty magistrate, see to it that her appointed lawyer can't make it, get 5 days remand. And now, just because this matter has taken off on a life of its own, please, I do see that the police are doubling down. There are selective leaks, there are leaks of WhatsApp messages, and the entire undue process has been visited upon the girl. I don't think I can put it better than an old song which said, बड़ा बहादुर बन फिरता है जो बच्चों से लड़ता है. This is what is happening. And the Delhi police are losing sympathy.
Okay, Ishkaran, I'm coming to you. Sudesh Verma raised his hand when that song was quoted.
If you allow me, I'd like to respond. You see, it is very easy to insinuate. I'm telling you, I told you, I began my conversation with you by saying that we are not happy that such a thing happened with that lady. But I also told you that nobody has an angst or a personal anger against her. The police must have found something.
Okay.
So wait for the investigation.
Yeah,
Don't take judgment.
So I
Otherwise,
agree with you. In fact,
get explanation for why you said today something.
Okay, I agree with you. Let's wait for the investigation. Police may know something they haven't told us so far, because I very closely heard the entire news briefing where they said, well, these are the guys who created the toolkit and they wanted to spread the word. They said, follow XYZ people for more information. Let's spread this word. They also said, tag these people, including one character, Peter Fredericks, whose name is there in the toolkit, which the police says has been on their radar for a while now, since 2005, 2006, and especially in the last few years. A man who's written many books which I can see can get problematic for the current establishment. His last book was actually called Saffron Fascism, which got released last year. Now, what are his links? Police will have to tell us, but they suspect that because he was his name was in the toolkit as somebody who should be tagged on these messages and on these tweets, there may be a link. Whether these Nikita and others actually met, we don't know. So that part the police still has to investigate and find out. Same goes for the other foundation, the foundation which is said to be pro-Khalistani, the pro-Khalistani foundation, and their founder, Mohd Ariwal, whether or not he has link. Again, something that the police still has to investigate. Ishkaran Bhandari wanted to make a point. Go ahead.
When we started the debate on the larger issue without the specific case, then I started by saying that on the larger issue, no government will give away these laws, and that's the reality. But when we come to the specific case, what is the case we have before us? That there was unfortunate violence on the Red Fort on 26th that nobody can deny. That has been captured by camera. Now, what caused that violence? That has to be investigated. The police version believes that this toolkit was a part of planning of that violence. I have no information with me, and nobody would have any information with them to scuttle that line of investigation. Even the sedition law, classically, if it leads to violence, it is being correctly applied. We saw the violence. Did this toolkit cause violence or did it not cause violence? Did that Zoom call lead to some planning? Did that Zoom call not lead to some planning? Was Mohd Ariwal and somebody's name whom you took right now involved in that? Not involved that? How do we, sitting here, judge it one way or the other without an investigation? That is all the police is doing. So now if somebody starts reading the minds of the police, that in one case they had put some section, but because they could not arrest in that case, now they have a vengeance to do it. I am not a mind reader here, so I cannot read that. But at the stage we are in, it is an investigation stage. Should an arrest have been done? Should have it not been done? That is also a discretion of the police. Either you get an anticipatory bail from the court, or the court, after you're arrested, gives you a bail. As of now, there was no anticipatory bail. Some people have filed a transit bail in the Honorable High Court of Mumbai. Maybe the court will do it. But what the police is doing is investigation. in a case where there was demonstrable violence on the Red Fort, and I do not know how that can be scuttled at this stage.
But
under
is
these
it,
laws.
is it police's discretion that whether or not an arrest has to be made for a certain case, in the merits of the case and the charges which are there included? I mean, repeatedly we have a conversation about whether arrest needs to be and being in jail needs to be the norm, or getting the bail needs to be the norm. In this case, the second one, Nikita Jacob has already given a statement. She's officially already recorded a statement with the police. Could that process not have been followed with the others?
So that's what I'm saying. Either there are two options, right? Either once the police issues you a notice or a summons to come, you get an anticipatory bail, or the police, the discretion is the police's, that after you have been given a summon, do you arrest or do you not arrest? And that discretion they have carried out, because there was no anticipatory bail in this case. Nikita Jacob is going to the High Court. Maybe she gets an anticipatory or a transit bail, and then we will see how it goes. So that is why I'm saying at the stage you are in, it is a stage of investigation, and there is wide discretion in investigation. Obviously, there are judgments that notice has to be served. I think Mr. Hedde is referring to that. But the point is, was it served? And because in Nikita Jacob's case, I hear that she had appeared before the police once, right?
Yes.
So that means the notice was served, right? And now she has gone for a transit bail. Let the High Court decide what they do.
Sanjay Hegde.
The Supreme Court, in recently while granting bail to Munawar Farooqi, simply asked that one question: did you comply with Section 41? Did you follow the guidelines in Narnesh Kumar? The police had no answer. Despite that, the Delhi police have done exactly the same thing, and they have gone all the way to Bangalore to pick up a 21-year-old girl. The conduct speaks for itself, and everybody who's watching is not a fool. They are entitled to draw their conclusions. And when you go up after 21-year-old girls, then it is very difficult to justify. It only appears that you want to scare people.
But I just want to follow up with one question, because this has become a big controversy itself. Mr. Neeraj Kumar, let me start off with you. One issue that is being raised today is also the issue of the police not following due procedure. While the police says we made the arrest in the presence of the Bengaluru cops, the SHO was present, so we did inform them. The other aspect is that of transit custody, and whether they had to seek that or immediately directly just bring her to Delhi. Now, the Delhi police has, the sources have told us that under Section 80, you don't need to apply for transit custody. Would that be correct?
See, as long as you produce the person before a court of law within 24 hours,
yes,
you do not necessarily require a transit remand. That is my understanding of the law. It is not that every time you pick up a person outside your jurisdiction, you must produce him before the local court and take transit remand. You have to ensure that the person gets produced before a magistrate within 24 hours, and that excludes the time that you have taken in the travel. That is what the law says, if I remember right. So let us not find fault with the police's arrest itself. Look, in an investigation, the discretion to arrest or not to arrest is that of the investigating officer. Whether to ask for police custody remand, whether to subject the accused to custodial interrogation, this is all within the realm of the discretion of the investigating authority. And if there is somebody who can intervene or who can say no, it is always the court. It is the court before whom she was produced who could have said, why do you need custodial interrogation? Why do you need police custody remand? And so on and so forth. Police custody remand was asked for, and the magistrate gave that remand. So why is this fuss all about? I don't understand.
Okay, this is the point that Sudesh Sharma also made, and you're also making, Sanjay Hegde. The fact that she's been sent to 5 days of custody clearly shows that the court itself sees merit in what has been done.
Tanvi, can I respond?
No, 1 minute, Mr. Verma. Let Sanjay Hegde respond to what you and Neeraj Kumar said. I'm coming to you next, yeah.
See, there's a small matter of constitution. It may be an insignificant document for police people, but the constitution says the nearest magistrate under Article 22. So if you arrest somebody in Bangalore and then say, okay, I'm going to take in 24 hours, I can produce him in before a New York magistrate. You can do it, but is that right? There is the policemen are there under the constitution, and that is the supreme law. It is not optional. The second part is that you blame the magistrate. Oh, why it was after all the magistrate who gave custody. Yes, the magistrate was wrong. The Supreme Court judgment requires a specific checklist. Was that checklist complied with? I do suppose that questions will be asked about the magistrate either in appeal or through some other process. But right now, once questions are being asked in public forums, once you take a 21-year-old girl who, ironically, whose parents happen to be BJP supporters,
by her own admission. Yeah.
Then comes this question: where are we as a country heading?
Well, it's a good, I see, Mr. Hegde, that is a very, very good sign that within a family in our country, people can have different political views and function. Yes, Mr. Sudesh Sharma, if you will just allow me 2 more minutes, I will come to you and then you can make your points. But very quickly, I also want to go back to the larger conversation about the use of these laws. And Bahar, to you, when it comes to environmentalists and environment activists, it's not been an easy road ever. For whether it's the Congress or the BJP or any other government in power, it's always been the kind of activism that gets you in trouble with the establishment. But is this a bigger, newer problem today in terms of number of cases with serious charges being filed?
Well, Tanvi, I think it'll make the BJP spokesperson very happy when I say this. But I actually think that, this has happened during the time of the Congress. It's happened during the time of the BJP, that all kinds of laws are used. There's always an attempt made to paint environmentalists as anti-national, simply because their definition of development doesn't agree with the ruling government's definition of development. Now, I don't want to sort of get into a philosophical debate on what our definition of development should be. That is irrelevant to what we're discussing today. But I just like to re-emphasize that I do believe this is part of a larger conspiracy to shut down young voices of dissent. And while the lawyers on this panel are more qualified to, sort of debate on whether due process of law was followed or it wasn't, I just see a larger pattern over here that when environmentalists were questioning the draft EIA notifications, when it was being questioned why the Environment Ministry is diluting anti-pollution laws, then you slap, an anti-terror act on students. Now, someone has raised their voice against the farmers' protest. I don't know this young lady. I don't know who she is. But what I find extremely suspicious, just as a bystander, I am not talking as an environmentalist, but just as a bystander, I still don't get it how, even if she created the toolkit, even if I grant that, yes, she created the toolkit, I don't see the link between that and the violence. So that's just my larger point, and I'll rest it at that.
Yes, in fact, I think whether she created it or she just edited it is maybe a matter of what debate and what goes on in the courtrooms at some later point. But I don't think there's a denial of a connection that even she or her lawyers are making. Did it lead to the violence and a larger conspiracy to malign the image of our country, or is the action that we are now taking against such youngsters also maligning the image of our country? Is, I think, a matter of debate where you and I may have a different view than Mr. Sudesh Verma. Yes, Mr. Verma.
Yeah, thank you for giving it, because I have so many things to say. Let me begin with Sanjay Hegde. You see, what is said, he's a lawyer and he should talk like a lawyer, that if police has done something, you have a recourse in law. You are a professional lawyer. You do so much of activism. Go and do it, man. Why you are trying to create a narrative that 21-year-old suppressed by the government is going against? I'm telling you, we are not happy. We want to know why this happened. Was he a part of the conspiracy? Police will find out. There is no vendetta in that. Why do you expect that the mighty government will go against a girl? It's surprising. Don't try to create a narrative. Now, coming to environmentalists, when they try to become human rights activists, then this becomes a problem. Otherwise, if you are just an environmentalist, let me remind you, Al Gore, US Vice President, he spoke about inconvenient truth that happens in all the country. You know, Narendra Modi ji came out with the book Convenient Action. And as a prime minister also, he's proved that carbon rating has gone down. He has taken many steps to, push these environmental concerns, but he won't get appreciation because he doesn't belong to your ecosystem. If you have a problem, there are robust institutions in this country. There is an environmental code, there are ministries, there are NGOs, there is judiciary. But still you find problem. But yes, if you want, because I know that during our time, all environmentalists will become human rights activists. When the next government, UPA government comes, then all human rights activists will become environmental activists. This happens in this country, isn't it? But if the government is acting with a vendetta or government has misused the law, even if the police has done so, police need to be more accountable. We all agree to that, isn't it? Because we want to create a better society. So when the police have made arrests and they're trying to figure out something, please don't prejudice the whole case. This is what my case is all about.
Okay. Let's move to the larger point now, Mr. Verma. 47 cases of sedition in 2014. In 2019, there were 93. My sense is that while 2020 data of NCRB is not out, if you look at last year and this year, it is definitely going to be higher than 93. When you look at the conviction rate that we've actually seen, 16.7% in 2017, it was down to 3% in 2019. Isn't that a bit of a concern?
You see, of course, any such thing is a part of concern. I entirely agree with the panelists. If you're talking about broader legal system, I spoke about the law on bail. Why should people go in jail without being convicted? Tell me that. It should be as a matter of right, but they don't get it. The courts should become lenient, isn't it? But sadly, this is the system. Lower courts don't give bail. It's a larger issue. Sanjay Hegde would also agree. When you talk about larger issues, I am with you. But when you take a specific case, just because the larger ecosystem that opposes this government has come out in your favor, it doesn't make any case, isn't it?
No. Okay, I appreciate what you're trying to say, but my sense is if I start picking up specific issues, your response will be the same to all that, in this there was merit, in this there was merit. But then where are the convictions, Mr. Sedition Verma?
You tell me they belong to that ecosystem, we can't help it. Every time Mr. Sanjay Hegde jumps or Mr. Bhushan jumps. So the same ecosystem. So what do we say?
Okay. All right. I have one more point that I want to take to our legal experts. Now, this is the point that we made in the beginning to say if somebody has said something that has led to violence and you've criticized the government, Ishkaran, and government policies, called for a protest or a campaign and a movement, and at some point you've seen violence. Now, how do we know whether the two can be linked? What's the time gap that we are looking at? We've seen last year in the Delhi violence cases, speeches were made 2 months ago and people were arrested for violence that happened 2 months later when they were in another part of the country. So where do you connect the two and say, something that you said yesterday or 2 months ago, 6 months ago actually led to this?
See, that is the entire nub of the debate. But in those cases, people are still in jail. So the courts have found that there was a causal link which came out during the investigation, unless we do not trust our courts also. So let's be very clear on one fact. That is why when we started the larger debate, I did say that the laws restricting speech in our country are very strong, but that was not concerning speech which leads to violence. These cases you are citing, as I said, Red Fort was a case of violence. Was the toolkit a part of that violence plan? I do not know that. Only an investigation can know that. Were speeches given at Shaheen Bagh a part of the violence or the riots which occurred? That cannot be found out except by investigation. We can make political statements. If you're on the left, you can say that there is no link. If you're on the right, you can say there is a definite link and a conspiracy. But how do we find it? Investigation, which then goes to the court, and then the court decides. In these cases, which we are talking 2 months ago speech or whatever, I think that Shaheen Bagh, the courts saw it fit to keep people in jail, and there are people still in jail. So we have to either trust our system, and those cases have gone to superior courts also. So if we do not trust our judicial process, then we cannot have a legal debate. Then we are just having a political debate. We can keep having that.
So Sanjay Hegde.
See, as far as the CAA matters are concerned, most of those prosecutions are now under the UAPA, where thanks to a Supreme Court judgment in Watali's case, bail is almost impossible to be granted. at the initial stage. There is a huge problem there. But now answering the specific question about proximity of violence. The sedition law, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, requires proximate violence. That is why in Balbir Singh's case, where people raised slogans on the day of Indira Gandhi's assassination, but nothing happened. They got acquitted. Let me give you an actual illustration. Supposing you say goli maro salo ko and goli happens, and it is not necessarily protesters but possibly the policemen who have the goli, then there might be a case for sedition. But there has to be a proximate causal link. Just because you discuss an issue, we discuss so many issues on your news show. A week later, based on some discussion out here and a WhatsApp segments taken out of context, forwarded all over the place, some violence happens. Would we then be responsible? Please look, without there being a proximate causal link, I don't think this section is constitutional.
Okay, so those are two different points of view on the point about proximity to any violence that may have taken place and who can be held accountable. In this case, we will have to wait and see whether that does take place. Now, I just want to tell our viewers about a story that came today in Times of India, an analysis of data that has been done. And according to this story, it says that if you look at the cases which are about offences against state, so this actually includes cases against UAPA, it includes cases against Official Secrets Act, sedition, prevention of damage to public property, and it's then analyzed data for 2017, 18, 19. The number of people convicted is not even 1/4 of those who are actually let go, discharged or acquitted. And that is why this concern is now rising, that you may be arresting, for example, 16,000 people, 16,200 people were arrested in 2017. Just about 1,734 were convicted, and far more number of people were actually discharged. That data suggests that there is a huge gap between people who are being picked up under these laws for charges or under UAPA or sedition or Official Secrets Act, and cases where it is being proven that they actually did something. Now, yes, it is a procedural thing. Yes, if you are arrested once, you will have to go through the whole process. You may end up being in jail, which is what we are looking at, and 4 years, 5 years later, you will end up probably being innocent, depending on what the court finds. But it takes that long. And that, I think, is a concern, Mr. Sudesh Verma, that you can say that there is a process of law and you can go to the court and you can go to the higher court, but there is a message that also goes around when 16,000 people or 20,000 people every year are arrested under these charges.
Of course, then we agree with you. It's a serious concern, and no innocent person should be in jail. Why should they spend even 1 day in jail if they are innocent? And that is the challenge that law enforcing agencies, investigative agencies are facing, and we must evolve as a society. I entirely agree with you, and something must be done.
Yes, but who's going to do it? Shouldn't it be the party in power and in parliament with the largest number of seats?
Don't put everything in the shoes of politics. There is judiciary. There are implementing executive.
I don't want to put everything on the judiciary. Honestly, I would like to see the policy makers also take some decisions.
That way. Society is more powerful. They elect leaders. They elect politicians, political parties. They are above everything. If society starts demanding that, every politician will have to do that.
Mr. Hegde, should we leave it on and expect it from the judiciary then?
See, whether it's the policeman or the judiciary, everybody then ends up thinking that they're doing a job. And people often seem to go through the motions. The first and foremost thing would be the policeman feels a sense of power only when he arrests somebody. Because you take away that power or circumscribe that power and say that if you arrest somebody, tell me in writing can you do without the arrest? If that question is posed by senior police officials themselves, then a lot of false arrests will also come down. But no, you leave it to the Thanedar. The Thanedar says, I want to keep things quiet. Pehle pakdo sale ko, put person inside. Then let the court system deal with it. Because if this doesn't happen, then the option would be that the courts, whenever they acquit somebody, should say action against the policeman. I think that also would lead to its own injustices.
Yes, absolutely.
So it is better that the police themselves say that have a procedure that when they arrest somebody, there has to be a justification statement kept on the record.
Well, and you know, how many times has the Supreme Court actually spoken about the process to be followed for arrest, the due diligence that must be done, the case that must be shown, merit that must be shown before you make an arrest, but it still goes on in every part of our country. So even with the judiciary intervention, I don't think it's helped. I'm out of time, but last 30 seconds to Ishkaran on this one.
See, why only these laws? The amount of false cases and low conviction rates in India are a huge problem, and why only blame the police? Even private civil disputes become criminal cases and people go to jail, and that is a larger issue of problem, and that's a larger issue of getting bails, where we need a systematic change. Unfortunately, that is what we are struggling with as a nation. Even in civil cases, I'm telling you, in trial courts and high court, people can't recover their money in civil cases, and criminal cases get filed. So that is all a reality which needs a systematic change in the country.
A systematic change would actually mean a change that's demanded by the people and responded by all institutions and arms of our democracy, whether it's the legislation or the executive or even the judiciary. But at this point, viewers, it does look like a case where more and more cases under sedition and UAP and Official Secrets Act are being filed, where somewhere the case and the fades out, somewhere it fizzles out, and people are discharged at a later stage. But perhaps the point is made. The point of sending a message, a strong message to the people who may be wanting to ask questions, people who may be wanting to seek accountability, people who may be wanting to start a movement. A toolkit at the end of the day is just a tool to spread the word. Like your pamphlets used to be in the 70s and loudspeakers in the 70s. Now, instead of the loudspeakers and the pamphlets and the posters or banners, you're actually using tweets and social media and toolkits. A very, very powerful tool that is used to generate buzz, spread awareness about any kind of issue, and it could be from any kind of ideology for any institution or any group on social media. It's not necessarily a bad thing. What you do with the toolkit is debatable in this specific case. We don't know so far, but the messaging definitely seems to be a little troublesome. We wait to see what happens in this case and what more does the Delhi police find. Thank you so much for joining us on this debate.